If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Welcome to IndoctriNation, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein.
You are not alone. And now there are 2 resources that I've put together specifically for your journey. This is your host, Rachel Bernstein. I am an educator and a therapist and a cult specialist. And I am very excited to announce Restart and Restore, a journal for survivors of manipulation, and a companion notebook that I've put together to go with it that has people's stories that they've shared with me that they wanted to share with you, and some wonderful quotes from people whose thoughts I truly admire, and more pages and writing prompts for you to continue with the writing that can help you along your healing journey. This isn't just another blank journal. It's a trauma-informed recovery companion, and it offers psychoeducation on the mechanics of manipulation and control and therapeutic writing prompts to explore your history and your strengths, practical exercises that transform insights into some actionable steps, and the freedom to heal at your own pace. You can do it in the time frame that works for you without any judgment or pressure. Whether you joined the organization or the relationship that was controlling as a teen or as an adult, Restart and Restore provides the structure and, I think, validation needed to process your experiences safely. I'm also excited to share, beyond the journal and its companion notebook, that I'm currently working on a second journal specifically for those born and raised in high control groups or high control family units, as their healing journey often involves different and specialized challenges. Restart and Restore and its companion notebook are available now, and you can find the link in the show notes. Thank you very much. I hope it's helpful to you or to someone you love. Hello, everyone. Today on the show, I am delighted to have Rachel Montgomery Ray. She is a dedicated advocate for survivors of institutional harm in Buddhism. Drawing from her personal experience, she offers insights into legal challenges and support mechanisms for victims. Rachel co-founded a peer-led support group committed to education, outreach, and meaningful systemic change. And I had the honor of moderating a panel that she was on at a conference through Heartwood, wonderful organization. Here is Rachel now. I am so happy you're going to get to hear her story. It is such a pleasure to be able to talk to Rachel Montgomery today. It is always so nice to see you. And I know that we had a brief moment of seeing each other in person in Chicago at the Heartwood conference at Northwestern. And that was very powerful. I really appreciated your insights and the way you speak. You remind me of someone who has this very level-headed way of saying things that are devastating. You kind of say it calmly, but behind the words are these just images of things that you've been through and what you've been up against. And so I want people to see your strength in that and also really hear your words, the gravity of the story. It's a nice combination to be able to have that. And I'm sure it's also good for yourself to keep yourself calmer as you're talking about these things. But I would love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself and then we'll start talking.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Always great to see you. For introductions, let's see. What hat am I going to wear today? I live in the Seattle area. I identify myself as a cult survivor and someone who also experienced a cult situation in a Buddhist context. And often I identify myself also as a survivor of sexual abuse in that context as well. So that's how I like to identify myself in this space. And I'm comfortable with survivor or victim. It's how I orient myself in these opportunities to talk about my experience is to put myself there. But outside of that, I'm a cat mom, dedicated spouse, and right now avid weed puller. I'm trying to get my garden beds ready for the fall.
A weed puller. I love that. That's so interesting. I love that you have this other life too, not just as a survivor or victim. It's good that you are highlighting the fact that terminology is, I think, and should be a very personal decision. And that you get to have this other life. You get to be a cat mom and a partner and a weed puller. I recently spoke with Carol Murchison, the attorney who represented you, who's now a kind of a friend to all, which is really quite lovely. And it's an interesting visual because I sort of see her as a weed puller. I mean, I see her as someone who kind of comes through and is like, nope, nope, can't do that anymore. No, gotta go. To make space for things that are healthy and healthier and that can help people flourish. And it's a very interesting metaphor. So I think it's great to be able to talk about the fact that you have a life now, and it sounds really nice. And if we can, because I certainly want to get to the lawsuit, the complaint, what happened to you. I have a lot of reactions to the whole scene that played out that became part of the lawsuit that really happened to you in real time and was devastating and confusing, I'm sure, at the time. So tell us a little bit about what brought you into searching for this spiritual path and also then finding this center.
That's a great place to start. I was a young adult when I had a close friend who had joined a Buddhist community as an employee of that community. I had been invited to go and visit her for quite a long time. And just circumstantially, it hadn't worked out. But I finally made it up for a 4th of July celebration, which is a really unique time to be at a cult for a celebration because cults are already high energy. And then it's really high energy when there's some sort of event. And so I would say it started with a very enchanting holiday-oriented experience. So lots of people, lots of positive socializing, positive interactions, food, fireworks, a really fun introductory experience to this community. And it was on such a positive note that I started the experience that I was then asked if I'd be willing to consider working there for the remainder of the summer. It felt like something I couldn't pass up. I was young. I grew up my entire life in one semi-rural place in rural Washington state. And I was always intrigued by the big city or other people's life experiences and other sorts of people. Having not grown up with exposure to much beyond my little world, it was just really exciting, mentally exciting to think about meeting these new people, getting to know them better. And I wasn't attracted with the intent to convert to the religion. But as we know how cults work. I did quickly get swept into the belief system. I was converted by August. It was pretty quick.
Wow. And so what does that mean to be converted in this context?
Well, I was raised in a more Christian, Protestant type household upbringing, and I felt kind of like a lazy Christian or a disengaged Christian as I got older. I went into college, and I wasn't focused on any sort of faith or religious aspect to my life at the time. But I still felt like if someone were to ask me on the street, I would say that I was a Christian. So it was a bit of a process for me to learn the faith and belief system of the place I was living. And one of the, I don't know to say it's a requirement, but one of the aspects of the experience, this immersive experience of working there, was to get a daily lesson in their belief system. And the lessons, one a day, culminated to me having a change of heart, a change of thought about their belief system, my own lukewarm belief system, and deciding to go through the ritual practices to take on and go into their belief system, how that transitioned.
Okay. So I think just getting to that space so soon says a lot. Says a lot about being open to it, but also the system itself and how it really drives that engine. And I wonder also, just in terms of the community, how much being a part of a community played part in this.
I've had to think about that a lot because the question of would I have stayed in the faith without the community? Or did I leave the faith because of the experiences I had around the faith? Trying to decipher for myself years later where I landed in my willingness to stay engaged in the religion or the specific flavor of religion that they were offering. And I think the community was the primary pull factor because they modeled such loving and warm behaviors that were really attractive. And I think that's not all that dissimilar from what is talked about in Christianity, where you go out into the world and there's language around emulating Christ-like behaviors and being a positive influence on others and living closely day by day, summer camp style. So like 24/7 with a lot of adults that are modeling really positive, attractive behaviors, people you want to be around, people that make you feel good when you're around them. Yeah, that would make me think whatever they're believing in, I would want to believe in too.
Yeah. And I think living communally, having that, the 24/7-ness of it, the fun, the connection, it does breed a lot of closeness and specialness. And it's something then you don't want to leave. In fact, even when people go to summer camp, and I know that from my own experience, just coming home from that, you feel down. You're coming off of a high and you don't want it to end. And that's often why there are a lot of tears the last night or two, because you anticipate that it's going to be hard. So I think you try to sustain that as much as possible in your life. And not a lot of adults get to experience it. So when it's there, I'm sure it feels very nice to be a part of something. I wonder also when you were saying this flavor, that was an interesting distinction. I know that with so many different religious movements, they are going to have their own take on it. From what you understand about this particular group, now we'll talk about this particular group for a little bit before we get to the experience. What was it and what was its flavor?
To give context, when I was first oriented to the community, I didn't have any previous data points for Buddhism. So this was my first exposure to Buddhism, and I really didn't know what Buddhism was or had any way to discern if this is like standard Buddhism or if this is an offshoot of any sort of standard. But afterwards, in trying to make sense of the experience, is where I learned much more about Buddhism as a whole, different aspects and flavors that the religion takes. I'll say for myself, through that experience, I learned how peculiar I think this particular flavor may have been. And to say, when adults isolate themselves geographically, information-wise, like when you limit your intake of outside influences and you isolate geographically in like an off-the-grid type dynamic that's led by one person, it makes sense it would start to form its own unique characteristics. I mean, it's like its own little petri dish. And so without those influences, it really turned into, I think, maybe more of its own thing. So I've had to do more to educate myself on what was the local flavor of the religion versus Buddhism in a broader context, and where they have similarities and where they don't, where they're different. And for the particular community I was in, it falls under the umbrella of like guru-student type Buddhism. So having a dynamic where there's a guru and a student relationship, and that's really the centerpiece, focus point of how you operationalize the faith.
Yeah, I love the idea of a petri dish. It's like learning about different animals that live on different continents. And you're like, kangaroos. How did that
It's
happen?
feeling like a platypus. Yeah.
Like a platypus. Right. I think it is so interesting that when people get involved in these kinds of fringe organizations, that they are then exposed to this. And if you don't have a frame of reference, you might not know how unusual it is, but you also might not know how wrong it is. I think that plays a big part in this scene as we're about to unfold it.
Agreed.
Yeah. So tell me about your impressions when you first got there and your impression of the leader. Let's talk a little bit about him.
Well, I've said this before, and it really is true. When I was a young adult, I was really naive to the idea that people could have intentions that were malicious towards a person. You couldn't tell it on the offset. I really had like a more Disney type thought that the villain is like a really visible, it's really in your face who the bad guy is, so to speak. So going into the community, well, first I assumed that no one would have any sort of ulterior motives or malicious intents, that everyone there was a good, healthy, safe person, especially because it's a religious environment. That was another assumption I carried. Truly, everyone was wonderful. So my experience was these were really wonderful, enjoyable, safe people to be around. The teacher initially was very peripheral. In the specific community I was in, the center, the close circle of the teachers who has the most exposure to them and their behaviors and their habits. And the further you are from that sort of close knit around the teacher community, the less you get to know the spectrum of that person. It's much more of a facade of the person the further you get from that inner circle. So my initial impressions of the teacher were very much like a performative type, curated, I would say, persona that person put out in the community. Of course, as you get closer into the inner circle, although I'll argue it's pretty abrupt where you go from peripheral to knowing their true behavior, it feels like quite a big sudden shift. But initially, yeah, just a really shiny version of that person's curated persona.
Seeing also how people are responding to someone is something that can really affect your feeling about this person, or if this person has a certain mystique because people just are so enamored with them. If people seem to have love for this person, then you will think they're worthy of that, as opposed to sometimes people really want to have that feeling towards a person who is in charge rather than that person really deserving it. So it sometimes can play with your head in those moments of adoration. How much did that play a part in how you saw other people responding to him?
Huge. I'm so glad you brought this up because that's probably primary to my story, because I came in very skeptical. I mean, thoughts I had is like, is this person a fraud? Are they a buffoon? Because they're so strange. I'm not accustomed to seeing someone that has aloof behaviors, that wears a spiritual wardrobe, so has clothes and adornments that are unique and not in a way that you can relate to. So being on a throne, having different clothes, behaving in ways that are maybe more unusual or outside of the standard of what you would normally see. And at first, I took it with like an open mind of like, this is different. But I will admit that I had little thoughts of like, this is a little strange. Like, is this person really an enlightened being on a throne? Is that really true? Or is this sort of an idea or a metaphor that's gotten out of hand? That was like my first couple weeks. I didn't commit to any thought, but I had many thoughts that fluttered through my mind. But I did see that people that are highly educated, very intelligent, doctors, lawyers, were very committed to this person, like you're talking about, just showering them in appreciation and affection. And I had the thought of, well, if all of these really intelligent adults have this sense of this person, then I'm more inclined to think what they think than but the little negative, doubtful thoughts that were fluttering in and out.
Right. You can feel, I think, in those moments, there would be something wrong with you and your thinking if you saw him suspiciously or if you looked down on him and you didn't see him the same way. Yeah, we attribute a lot when we see people who we respect respecting somebody else. And so, yes, it is very motivational in terms of developing our own feelings, but also, and I'm so glad you brought this up, also ignoring those moments where you're thinking, really? Him? Because those, after a while, go away and you don't have them as a guide anymore until they start to come back, until you're starting to see things and you're like, oh, this is what I was thinking. That got very quiet for a long stretch of time. And so, what else were you wondering, even in tiny little moments? Were there things happening that were giving you pause, making you really doubt or wonder or be worried about being there?
I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that. Thinking back, there were several things that were off-putting that I tried to consider that it was because I had no exposure to this type of religious landscape. So I remember being really surprised when folks would bow all the way to their stomach. It could be in gravel, it could be in dirt, it could be, so not necessarily like a pleasant foundation to lay your body on. I remember thinking, oh, really? I even seen a pregnant person like go like on their belly on the gravel. It's like, wow, like we're really committed to that.
Right. Ooh. Mm-hmm.
Initially, I thought, is that a healthy behavior to have? The person comes into eyesight and you're bowing to the person. Felt peculiar. Growing up more Protestant Christian, it's really ingrained that you don't bow to men as a concept. So that was initially pretty tough. And then to see that he was unquestioned was also another pause. And the dynamic wasn't one that was collaborative or back and forth. It was really like a one-way communication style. And seeing that initially was, again, I was just trying to adjust. Is this the faith? This is the religion. And the charms of it, the silver lining story of it is you have this one person who's supposedly dedicated their entire lives to being your spiritual support, your life support. And so I was trying to understand that that's the context. That's how I was sort of starting to acclimate myself to those things that I initially, my knee-jerk reaction was, this is outside of my comfort zone.
Oh, it's so interesting. Going back to this visual of this pregnant person going all the way down and laying on her belly on whatever ground she was on. I think about what kind of personality would be okay with that or would demand it. I think about how uncomfortable I am when a group of people are singing happy birthday to me. Don't know what to do with myself. God, I wish this song were shorter. But it is, yes, a very different persona who expects that or who would demand it or might even punish people for not doing it. But to have someone really put their health at risk and smushing a pregnant belly onto a hard surface.
And maybe they had modified it, but in the moment, it was just, perhaps physically they did some sort of modification. I'm sure they did to protect themselves, but just to see that regardless of, it was on gravel, I have the visual, but there's a chance that they modified their body to make it appropriate for them, I'm sure. But still, the action of it in the setting it was in for someone in a state where just that there's no circumstance in which you wouldn't is interesting, that it's that level of obligatory.
Right. And the non-questioning. If there were things that you disagreed with, or if there are things that didn't quite come together, typically there are going to be contradictions and other things that people are going to try to make sense of things. if they're trying to apply logic to a spiritual system like this, it doesn't sometimes fit. So you got the impression, maybe the clear message, that you couldn't ask or you couldn't disagree. How was that transmitted?
I don't remember that I couldn't disagree or ask questions. I'll say that when it came to talking about the religion, I could ask questions and I could disagree. And I think folks took it as an opportunity to help me see things the way they would need me to see things. But just me as a person, I wouldn't be in the position to question a person's individual choice. So if I saw someone doing something like prostrations in the gravel, or I'm seeing like, okay, that's their personal way that they're doing their belief system, who am I to ask? So I didn't ever take the approach to question somebody's personal choices, but I would ask about the religion. My daily lessons that I received, that would be a chance for me to ask questions and debate sometimes with people about what they were sharing about their religion. And I think that was received positively and then used to support me and to advance my thinking more in their direction. And then also maybe seen as a little humorous, because I'm this young female in this community who's got, a bug in her bonnet or bee in her bonnet a couple times to say, I don't understand this. I understood it to be fun banter to try and identify our differences and help me come to different conclusions.
Okay, so I want to be able to move into what happened and what was part of the lawsuit and that whole process. I know that does mean delving into something that's hard to delve into, that's emotional. So I'm hoping it feels okay to talk about it. I guess I want people to understand what was starting to develop there in terms of your closeness with the leader and what became, I think, more intimate emotionally that then he took advantage of.
Well, how it scaffolded was I warmed into the faith and then I became a practitioner of the faith and followed the practices, attempting to follow the practices of everyone else. A little different, I'll say, like as a asterisk to this, is I was working at the facility, I was working for the people there. So a little different than being there as a student or being there with like the sole purpose is I'm dedicated to faith. So I was a little removed from some of the more social aspects to the practice and a little isolated from even their own unique flavor of the religion. So I had those small lessons from people, but I wasn't often included in large lecture formats or teaching formats because my position there was as an employee. So I continued to practice, and those conditions I just described as like I was there as an employee, I didn't have access to these group learning environments in the same way other people did, were later what was exploited as I had more of a one-on-one structure of the religion. So the way I ended up learning and growing in the faith was just with the guru. And so I was set into this sort of isolated way of learning and practicing the religion and getting feedback on the religion. And it's that dynamic that was exploited for me to experience circumstances of severe harm, which I'm comfortable talking about today.
You are? Okay. Okay. Thank you for letting me know that. I think also to clarify, when you say that you were working there, I'm thinking that I remember this reading some of the details that you were working for free, or I don't know if you were getting paid or not, or if it was expected, like a bartering kind of for being there that you were working.
That was an element for sure, that you would have the good karma, the good fortune to get to be there in and of itself as part of the pay package. But I did have a stipend that for a young person, late teens, early 20s, your sense of what time is worth is a little bit different when you get older. So you're willing to work for a lot less, especially in a summer camp type environment. And then it did include room and board. So circumstantially, I had access to be there and to get fully fed there and to have a place to sleep there in order to work there. So, and it was expensive to be there as a student, I'll say. To pay for all of those things on your own would be really cost prohibitive. And so this was, as I continued to come back, really one of the only ways in which I could continue in that community would be to be there in an employee type capacity.
Got you. Okay. And where was this community?
It's still there. It's outside of Eugene, Oregon, rural Oregon. I know Oregon. Sorry, Oregon.
Yes. There's a lot going on there. There is. Okay. So sorry. Sorry, state of Oregon, but it is what it is. Okay. And it's still there. Interesting. So you were saying that your avenue towards more learning and understanding and connection to the community was specifically time spent with the leader on your own.
That's what it evolved to. So I did get the opportunity, that's how it would have been put, to get more one-on-one teachings with the teacher and their dedicated time to helping me in the context of I'm not in the community as a student, so I don't have access to the larger group teachings in those learning environments. And so customized learning experiences would have to be generated for me, and they were customized in a way that was certainly exploitive. But as a young person and someone committed in that community, I perceived it as just such a wonderful, fortunate opportunity that I could get teachings directly from the primary deliverer of the teachings in that community. I mean, you could receive teachings from a senior student or from a monastic, but the person that is there to really transmit the material is the guru.
Got you. And did you feel comfortable in his presence even before things started, or was there something kind of odd feeling about being with him?
You know, I think it's strange to be around a person that's so powerful. Just in general, it's peculiar when there's such obedience to that person and there's such high esteem for that person. People traveling across the world to come and be at the feet of this person. It's different than being around someone that doesn't have that status.
Right. So let's talk about what started to happen and then eventually what did happen that became the reason for the lawsuit, even though I'm sure there were many reasons, but the focus point of it.
The focus point is this would be contested. The organization wouldn't agree to my narrative, but I did have these one-on-one teachings with the teacher. The teacher explained in those teachings that I had certain negative karma or baggage because I didn't have the karma to be there as a student. So karmically, I didn't have the student status. I was there as an employee, so like maybe lower karmically in my opportunity. And I had a background as a Christian, which he explained to me was a deficit against my ability to understand and absorb the teaching. So I went into these one-on-one teachings with being made aware that I was starting lower than other people. And so as a competitive person, it's possible this was something that progressed over a few years. So I'd been in the community already a couple of years before these one-on-one teachings started. And this narrative that he presented was presented to me. It's quite possible he'd observed that I'm a fairly competitive person and I want to have a standard of excellence for everything I do. So maybe there was intentionality between positioning those one-on-one teachings as I'm in a deficit and I need to catch up to my peers. And here's the opportunity to catch up and to catch up more quickly. So the first task I was given that was part of this opportunity was to do certain practices in order to have the karma necessary to clean and maintain sacred objects. So sacred objects are common, I guess, maybe in all religions, where some objects have special significance. And in Buddhism, the significance of those objects and maintaining, touching, cleaning those objects would require you to maintain certain standards of behavior and have certain levels of teaching or permissions to be able to do those sorts of activities. So I was given this opportunity for this job, but to meet that opportunity, which it's also karmically good to get to touch all those sacred objects. So it's a positive feedback loop, that opportunity. I would do better in my practice and then get more enhanced in my practice as a result of this opportunity. The entry point into that positive feedback loop was these one-on-one teachings, which started out as standard lecture style teachings and progressed into me performing physical acts on his body and him performing physical acts on my body of a sexual nature that were described as not a sexual nature.
And how were they described?
They were described as, and this is sort of a flavor in Buddhism where there's this possibility to have a tantric practice, to use your body to advance your path to enlightenment, to enhance or catapult you further into your practice. I understand, and I did understand from that community, that tantric practice is something that's for more advanced students. There's actually transparency there, that that's not something that you start out with on day one. So for folks that aren't familiar with tantric practice, I'm not a subject matter expert on it, but it's easy to find information on what it is. It does involve the body and sexual type behaviors that are not framed as sexual behaviors. So it would make sense that you don't start day one in those practices. You get warmed up to them. You advance towards them in your practice. But the teacher told me that I was special. Here we go, a broken record, right? Everyone has this story. I was special. He let me know we actually knew each other in a past life, and we had all these connections that he hadn't disclosed earlier, but he felt like now was the right time to let me know. And so I actually had this opportunity to have this special relationship where I could advance in Buddhism more quickly with him. So having someone that's a celebrity status, and then having someone that at that point my thinking was he was an enlightened being, like I had evolved in my thinking in the context of that community, to see him as an enlightened being, to see him as a Buddha, which is what you're instructed to do there, as a goal. And because I'm competitive and goal-oriented, I got to that goal. And, I was in this position of thinking everything he said or did is for my benefit and the benefit of all beings. That's sort of the catchphrase around this person's behavior. And so anything they would suggest, this teacher would suggest, I would follow for the benefit of myself and for the benefit of all beings. And that included these behaviors that are of a sexual nature that were framed to me as something I would do while following visualization practices, which are pretty cornerstone in Buddhism meditation. Follow these visualization practices while things are happening to my body, and I'm being instructed to do things with someone's body, essentially being put into like a disassociated state.
So when you were doing these things, and you can describe them or not, I'll leave that up to you. I'm wondering if there was a part of you that would go in and out of a dissociative state, sort of wondering if this was right.
Well, I think adrenaline is such a funny thing, because I do remember having adrenaline, and I didn't let myself associate it with fear, but more with, I would say, not excitement per se, but like a type of me trying to channel those feelings, the elevated physical state, into a state of being grateful, of feeling like I am achieving these goals, somewhere like an ambition-oriented mindset. And that's how I transform them for myself. Of course, though, I look back, I was very much just afraid, but I didn't have the permissions in my mind anymore to articulate it in that way. It was very, very strong in the context of the flavor of the religion I had there, that negative thinking was always something to avoid. It was described as there's 5 types of positive thinking and 5 types of negative thinking. So now this is going to start to sound really culty, but all of your thoughts can be distilled into 10 types of thinking, right? Like it can be that simple. When you have negative thinking, it's cultivating negative karma for you. And because I'm in this religious state, doing religious visualizations, I'm really just trying to cultivate positive thinking. And there's no allowance in my mind to have anything negative.
There are these stories that I hear a lot, and that we also hear here on the podcast, about how people are disarmed, how people are kept from responding, from having a certain feeling that is commensurate with what's happening to them. And it keeps them from being clear, the fact that what's happening to them is wrong, or that they can be upset about it. It feels like then it is like a perpetrator's playground if you can make sure that other people can't get upset about what it is that you're doing to them. If you have that part of your personality that wants to do things to people that they shouldn't be doing. Not everyone takes advantage of that. In these situations, someone does. I think also that there is this idea that you were supposed to have gratitude, this idea of reciprocity, that here they're giving you something, you're coming from a lowly place, And so you should feel like this is a gift and be appreciative of it, even though I'm sure you were working for very little, working a lot. I can only imagine. And they should be having gratitude towards you. It should be reversed. But I know in the context of these groups, it doesn't really play out that way. I think you're just also not supposed to be negative because you're supposed to be feeling like they're willing to do all these things for me, even though I didn't deserve it. What do you think?
I think what's complicated for me, and I was describing this actually at the conference we were at in Chicago with someone, is the community I happened into was one that was really positive towards me. I felt like family. I felt really welcomed and brought in and really showered with appreciation, affection, friendship. I felt like a cherished member of the community, I guess I'll say. I did feel like they were grateful to me and grateful for what I offered. The narrative that the teacher was presenting felt actually not quite in line with how I experienced the community, but more, I think I'm realizing for the first time in having this conversation, the complexity of it too is that I was thinking that participating, this is like negative side of my personality, not really, I don't mean it that way, but I was really trying to be advanced. So I wasn't in a state of being subservient as much as I was in a state of it really hit the right buttons to tell me that I was behind everybody else and I could get ahead and I could even get further. And that really struck the right chord for me. I'm realizing for the first time in this conversation that really set me up to be fully committed to those situations that were adrenaline oriented and really charged with a lot of feelings, but forced to maintain it in a positive sense. But I had this opportunity that no one else would have, and that I could lean into being able to think of myself as special, that maybe that was something I wanted to hear. And I felt like I didn't want to let go of this new perception of myself as a special person. Those are the type of things that were weaponized against me in that dynamic that maybe are embarrassing to admit that I wanted so badly to feel special, but it's true.
Yeah, no matter your motivation, no matter what you were trying to heal, no matter what you were trying to feel, no matter what kind of advancement you were trying to go for, it's still the teacher's responsibility to uphold boundaries. It's still the teacher's responsibility to say, no, I'm not going to do that to you, to someone who trusts me, no matter why you're in the room. It's just good to be clear about that as you talk about it, even in your own mind. Think about these people. It's a misnomer, and I was talking about this on the podcast before. Like, they say that women slept their way to the top. Well, no, they didn't. They didn't. It was just that the men, or sometimes women too, but more often men who were in charge, withheld things from them until they got these favors, until they got access to their body. Even if the woman wanted to get ahead, still she was put in this situation of this is the only way to do it.
The only way to do it. And that is for the benefit of all beings to accomplish it. I mean, it's thinking like, what are you sleeping your way to the top to? I know I'm saying that like callously. I don't mean it. I guess yeah.
But it's the expression that's used.
Completely. For me, obviously the dynamics were so specifically religious. So I didn't identify them in the context of what was happening as something that was sexual even. But what was the top was for me just to become an enlightened human so I could be a better benefit to all of humanity and all living beings. I believe now that's not real and you don't obtain that through those types of behaviors. But at the time, that was the only playbook I had, was that the only way for me to become a better person was to be enlightened. And this was offered to me as the only way I could do that.
Wow. Okay. And that's not on you. That's not your fault. So going into the scene that I know from the case, I'm sure there are other scenes too. There's so much about it. And then I also want to get to the court process and then finishing up. I know that we could talk for hours, but there's something about reading about how it all went down, to whatever limited detail I have, but I would like for you to talk about it, and then I'll jump in to give my assessment.
Well, it was probably the best and worst thing that could have ever happened to me in the context of that community. So I had been for a few months working off of this new practice where I would do visualizations and have things happen to my body or be instructed to do things to my teacher's body. And it was all done in this state of visualizing certain deities or certain aspects of deities. So it was really just in my head for those experiences. A lot of things happened to my body for those times. And I was instructed to do different things to this person's body in those times. And those I could all contextualize within what felt like the flavor of the religion. Like I'd been in the religion for a couple of years, I'd been in the community for a couple of years, and I did understand these were part of the community, but I was put into this state of secrecy. So before I could initiate these teachings with the teacher, I was sworn into what's referred to as a Vajra promise in the context of this religion, where you keep something between you and the teacher, and it's an unbreakable promise. So it has really severe consequences. I mean, we think the Christian hell is scary. Well, I mean, this is like Christian hell times two. I mean, the consequences are really severe, which I don't think a lot of people think about when they think of Buddhism. It's just sort of interesting. And also, it's not one of the things that's brought up a lot. So if someone could go to Hogwarts and never learn about Horcruxes, for example, like you could be a Buddhism for a long time and no one brings up the Vajra promise because it's one of those small peripheral aspects, Pam, where you're at and where you are in the lineage in Buddhism. And so I was in the context of having these things experienced as part of my religion. I couldn't share it with anyone. I was under this Vajra promise. That was sort of the prerequisite to those teachings. And then I found myself in a situation where something broke outside of that container I was trying really hard to stay engaged in. So during this time where these things are happening to my body and vice versa, I'm getting rashes, I'm getting health problems, I'm having joint pain. My body was doing all the things that people say your body is saying no for you. My brain wasn't warmed up to the idea. But the thing that broke the camel's back, so cumulatively, I don't know whether or not I've ever left the community or just continued to live in that state, which I know a lot of people there do live in that state. So it's quite possible I could still be there today. Something that broke out of that mold is I was forced into a state of intoxication. So I was forced by the teacher to drink a large volume of wine on a certain social gathering. And while I was actually unconscious, he raped my body. And the consequence of that was I became pregnant. The context for that outcome is that in order to receive these teachings and to work closely with him, he required that he track my cycle. So he was aware of my cycle. And after, that was another prerequisite of being able to participate in these teachings, was he knows my cycle and can track my cycle. And after this event, I was treated differently. I shortly found out I was pregnant. And then the teacher, after I found out I was pregnant and I came to the teacher, admitted that I was pregnant and it was my destiny to have his child. So I often refer to it as being intentionally impregnated because to me, that's the circumstance of what happened to me. What happened next is that I panicked and articulated that wasn't what I wanted. I had the courage to articulate that this was a bit of a shock because I had only very small glimpses of not being able to move my body, but being awake during the moment. So I was aware that it had happened, but was aware that I was unconscious. So I started having lots of questions that were unanswerable, especially unanswerable because I couldn't talk to anybody about it. So I was Googling things about circumstantially, like, can a teacher do something to your body unconsciously and it's still to the benefit of all beings? And trying to wrap my head around the circumstances very naively, thinking like the answer's out there in some scripture, Buddhist scripture. I just don't have it top of mind or at my fingertips, but I can find the answers. But those questions culminated as well as I decided to have an abortion, which the teacher was willing to pay for under the promise that I would get pregnant and again in the future with his child, because this was my destiny. My time horizon was shortening during this time. Living in this state, I couldn't see past tomorrow. So I committed to that promise that I would in the future, really not being able to see past the same day. So I did go forward with the abortion, which was a huge challenge for me personally. And then those questions, like the ones I kind of glimpsed at, like not being unclear on how it's a teaching if I'm unconscious and I can't have those visualizations, and being unclear of how being impregnated unintentionally or against your knowledge could be to your benefit. Just trying to untangle the complexities of what I felt was a really complex teaching. Like, whoa, this is a really complicated teaching. There's a lot I got to figure out here, not finding answers. And that boiled over to me spilling the truth of what had happened to me to people in the inner circle of that community where I was now in that inner circle. And that resulted in me being excommunicated.
Which is often how it goes, which is incredible. I mean, it's adding insult to injury, literally, very often. The people in the community, how did they respond to you when you told them?
Aggressively. I became a virus or a cancer almost immediately. And I was so confused because I was just asking clarifications on teachings. That's how it felt to me. I didn't have any intention of wanting to leave the community or wanting to leave the practice, or at the time that wasn't in my thinking. But I mean, my perception is they took it really aggressively, which then resulted in very severe excommunication. So I found out later, folks were told that if they talked to me, their marriages would fall apart or they would get gravely ill, or which I didn't know any of that at the time, but that was what folks were told if they were to talk to me.
To become a pariah after what you've been through and to try to make sense of it. We will do that if we are thoughtful people. We'll assume there's some greater reason for this. And so we will want to understand what the thinking was, as opposed to here's someone who took advantage of his power and raped me.
Yeah, that wouldn't have even been in my mental possibility to fathom. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Hearing the story from someone on the outside, that is how it sounds. But within the context of it, it's going to be very confusing. And there are parts of the story, also this idea that, correct me if I'm wrong in how I'm remembering it, but just waking up and being left with no clothing on from the waist down just feels discarded, that you were just left there. And so if this was supposed to be this romantic thing, someone's tracking your cycle and they want you to be the mother of their child, it would seem to me like they'd be treating you not like, okay, now I'm done with doing this thing to her body and I'm just going to leave her on the floor.
Yeah, the complexity of what happened that isn't very public per se, because I don't know if it's been talked about. I don't know how much it's included in the case notes or the filings for the lawsuit. I'm aware of multiple children that he has, and these are not children he's claimed or had any parental connection to. I'm also aware of another rape where he tried to impregnate someone unsuccessfully earlier on in his life through force. Earlier on in his experience there. I hate to deduce it this way, but I think he's an individual that I would just say has a breeding kink. I think it's a sexual fetish because it's too many people, and then there isn't this post care for having a parental role or even acknowledging that the child is their offspring. To my knowledge, he will often say that it's not his offspring, even though it looks like him. For whatever reason, to me, the cards point that he has a breeding fetish. So it's a sexual fetish behavior, which is really bizarre to realize about a person. But for me, that's what all the signs point to.
Okay. What I think is also interesting too is the narcissistic part of it, the entitled part of it, that kept coming through as I was hearing your story. And going back to this kink, as you call it, it all ties together as you describe it, that he'd be willing to pay for the abortion if, like, it had conditions, which is so wrong. No, I mean, if it's something he did too, and he needs to take responsibility for all parts of it, but he'd be willing to do it if you don't tell anyone, which means he knows that it's wrong. And also if you promise to father a child of his in the future, as you were talking about. So back to this idea that's in his mind that this is something you need to do or that you owe him, which is not how getting pregnant should be. That it isn't also part of your bartering for services that you somehow have this child. But I do think there's so much that it speaks volumes about him in these conditions. Don't tell anyone, because if he was proud of it and if he thought it's okay, why not be able to tell everyone? And if he knew it was kosher, so to speak, if you can use that word for in this context, that you still needed to give him a child in the future. Really? This person? After he's done this to you, so that there was no sense that what he did took advantage of your trust and what he did was wrong. I don't see that in here. I'm not sure if that came through anywhere.
Every time I hear it come out of my own mouth, it's like, wow, like in these cult dynamics, reality really, it stretches to the limits. I mean, it can turn into anything, but it can turn into something really grave. I mean, where people will end their own lives because their reality is shifted in such a way, or in this case, I don't know what reality he lives in, but in a reality where he does this to a person, a young woman, and a reality where I took the same assumption I had of the reality I was in, which is it was to my benefit. I need to figure out exactly how, but it had to have been such a wild reality to be in.
Yes. The idea that we often will try to make sense of things that don't make sense often makes it easier for the perpetrator. We have this cognitive dissonance. We need to find the innocence in it. We need to find the meaning in it. Or what does that mean if there isn't any? And sometimes we'll find it. We'll be searching so hard that our heart will need to find it.
I understand people do that in all sorts of relationships. And when you have a relationship like a guru, your entire current life and future afterlives all depend on this one relationship. So the extent to which you will go to justify every behavior is extreme because the consequences are so dire if you don't figure it out.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so here you are with this situation.
Yeah.
And then how did you get yourself together enough to be even thinking about pursuing this legally and finding Carol and all of that?
I just feel really, really fortunate because myself at the time, for whatever reason, I mentioned I didn't respond positively to the abortion. I had told the teacher that one of the reasons I wanted the abortion was because I felt so young and I understand this is my destiny, living in that reality. My answer is, I'm grateful this is my destiny. And I really had this dream of my life that was different. And the dream I said was, I had this dream to do graduate school. I had a dream to join the Peace Corps. And so for whatever reason, the way I had experienced sort of an emotional aftermath from the abortion. So I guess I characterize it as like a depression. And the way I pulled myself out of that was working day and night on a Peace Corps application. So I justified to myself that I had made this decision to not pursue this destiny because I had said I had alternative things I wanted to have be part of my story before I've met that destiny. I know that's also crazy to say, but I'm speaking from how I was thinking about it at the time. So that Peace Corps application was successful. And so the timing worked out that the same time I was excommunicated, I was going into the Peace Corps shortly after. So I left the country. I actually left internet access. I left cellular access. I left, for the most part, electricity and running water. So I went into this totally different reality where I had no reminders of this community. I had no reminders of the religion. I was not in a country that had Buddhism as part of their religious landscape. And so I was just totally removed. And what I did was, I guess sort of a survival mechanism is I took the route of bury, lock away, cover it up, and just pivot totally on a dime to a different life. So I put it all away. It was easy to put away because there was no reminders. And it was so painful. Just to look at it was too much. So I had 2 years of living this other reality of not even letting myself remember that that's what I had just come from. But what I did do while I was in the Peace Corps, the times I did have internet, I ferociously consumed cult content, not recognizing necessarily like I was in a cult, but I would just watch a cult documentary on repeat. And it felt so good to my brain. I would just watch it and rewatch it and rewatch it and rewatch it. I think I was finding something cathartic. And that was when I came back from the Peace Corps. I advanced my learning there and I went to the public library and I got all the books on cults and I read everything I could read. And it was the cult community and how they discussed their experiences that helped me start to realize I was in a cult, which later evolved to a place where I could understand that I experienced abuse, sexual abuse in that context.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so sometimes people will say to me, I don't know how I am able to know if something I'm in is dangerous or not. And I'll sometimes say, if it's possible, if you can take a step away from a relationship, even say that you have the flu and you have to stay in bed or whatever excuse you can come up with. Because sometimes it breaks a spell, sometimes it gives you perspective, sometimes then it gives you a chance to reconnect inside. But you went far away in every way. It's like an emotional, spiritual palate cleanser. Like, let me just do something so different so that when I revisit it, I can really see it from that vantage point that sometimes I talk about like if you want to take a good photo of something, you need to take a step farther away to get the whole picture, the landscape. What a great gift you gave yourself. So here you had that sense of it, the clarity, and then you reached out for legal help, or what did you do?
This is again where I just feel really lucky, like a fortunate of circumstance. COVID happened. And someone who had been in the same cult community I was in had reached out and wanted to see about doing a podcast together during COVID. We were all doing all sorts of funny hobbies during lockdown. And so ours was exploring doing a podcast. And he was a practicing Buddhist at the time of the podcast and was wanting to dive into Buddhism. And we started talking regularly. I eventually told him the totality of my experience, which isn't something I had done with anyone in that community before. And in telling the totality of my experience, he connected me with someone who's a survivor of sexual abuse from another guru, which wasn't what he told me at the time. He just said, I really think you should talk to this friend I have about your experience, because I think she's experienced the same thing. Maybe you guys could learn something from talking to this person. Then I talked to that person, and that person connected me with Carol. So it was my lawyer. At the time, she was not my lawyer, but more just a friend of the community of Buddhist survivors. She was the first person to let me know that what I experienced was a crime and that it was a rape, and walked me through the process of making a police report.
My goodness. Woo. Okay. Well, I got goosebumps. I mean, just the shift, having the language, knowing that what happened was illegal also. Really, I'm sure, very different. Like you couldn't then keep finding some spiritual reason for it. It shifts things over to, what do I need to do about this? Were you thinking about trying to get justice? What were you thinking about? What was the motivation for you?
Well, I was thinking that when I started, I was fully anticipating a lot of time has passed. I don't think what happened to me was good. Now I'm waking up to this idea that it wasn't good. It was also illegal. And there needs to be maybe conversation around it. I was anticipating I would do this police report and it would result in, as years had passed at this point, everyone going, oh my gosh, wow, we didn't realize, Rachel, that that's what happened at the time. We were confused. So as a shorthand, I was expecting like a kumbaya kind of experience.
Right? Yeah.
Just so, so silly.
No, and it's beautiful. It's as it should be. It isn't, but it's as it should be. No, I get it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Not what happened. They dug in their heels. They also wrote a really severe, they made a public record. Folks are, of course, welcome to go find it if they're interested, but they wrote this really horrific letter detailing really severe lies about me and myself and my understanding of what had happened. And it really went above and beyond. I mean, like really creative writing style, like painted me as this completely other person, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. I had never seen myself as this, what did they call me? Like I was a shadowy person or something. I was like, wow, I didn't know I was like, of course, that's totally not true, of course. But it was the shock of like, wow, not only is this not a kumbaya moment, but there leverages an opportunity to like fabricate a different reality, which was not what I expected. It made me realize that, well, and I was already in touch with people that saw this from a legal perspective, which is any kind of accountability or awareness wasn't going to be in any way spearheaded or supported by the organization. Nothing could be done to help them come to a conclusion that we're a nonprofit in the state of Oregon, we're a religious entity, let's practice and model accountability, safe community practices. None of that was going to happen. And so now that I had legal connections, the next step became forcing that to happen through pursuing legal actions. So I wasn't coming at it from a perspective of anger or vengeance. At the time, it was just, I felt like I want to just knock on everyone's door, which is what the person that does the serving does on my behalf, and just say, hey, do you remember this thing that happened that you're saying didn't happen? Well, we're all going to make sure we all understand that it happened.
Yeah. Okay. Did you need to face him in court?
No, I didn't. I did face the board members. They came to my deposition in person, which is maybe a little unusual. So I got to see them for the first time. And that was one of the most healing aspects of the experience. I dreaded it severely, but seeing them in person took the monster under the bed and brought them into the light for me and really helped me to see even more of the reality that is the actual reality of the circumstances. All in all, the way that it summarized for me was pursuing legal action was what allowed me to have a mechanism for a type of accountability, and the only type of accountability I had available.
And what happened with the case?
The case settled. So the case came to resolution, which is really another way of saying that it didn't go to a trial environment. So it didn't go to an environment where the facts of the case are brought to a jury of your peers. It was concluded prior to it going to that stage.
Which goes along, I think, with his condition, never tell anyone thing. I think he likes to keep things out of the public eye and he doesn't want to be under scrutiny. It doesn't surprise me that it went in that direction. And since that time, what has it been like for you just to think about that process and move forward? And I'm sure every once in a while, you're busy in your life, and I'm sure there are days go by that it's not on your mind, which is blissful. But there are moments where it does come back. And where do your thoughts take you when you think about it all?
I can't believe I get to say this, but it comes to mind almost never. So my husband and I comment to each other because I think the case wrapped up officially like in February, January. And even by March or April, if you had asked us and we weren't thinking of an answer, how long ago did the case wrap up? We both thought it was like over a year ago. Because once it reached resolution, it really just dissolved space and time. It healed it historically. So I felt like all those past instances were all healed and wrapped up all in one culminative event. When I do think of it now, I think of it, positive isn't the right word, but it's reflective. I don't feel it in my body in the way that it would take hold of me before. I really just feel, and frankly, actually, what I think about the most when it does come up is I'm reminded of the people that are still there, that are in the state that I remember myself in and how unfortunate that state is. And I just send a little thought that I hope that that's not their permanent life story, or that's not always going to be their future. And that's really the only lingering sadness in it, is knowing that some grief will never dissipate. And for me, that's the grief, is not having those connections and knowing what those people are who I care about are in.
Wow. That's a very human toll, that there are people still there and there are people stuck in that and being treated potentially in similar ways, and have a lot to get through to get to where you are, I think, to really feel free, to be free. Part of what happens with so many people I've worked with where there wasn't representation, where the law wasn't up to speed, there's still so much room for growth and forward momentum in terms of understanding this legally and people really getting this in terms of the law in the United States and law in some other countries. There are some countries actually that are more forward thinking when it comes to coercion and other things than the US. So we really do have a lot of room to grow here. But there is something so interesting about what you said. I talked to so many people who have this unfinished story and it lingers because of it. And they didn't get either justice, or they didn't get their day in court, or they didn't get a payout, or they didn't get this moment where someone had to take responsibility had to say, okay, here, this is what you get to have because of what was done to you. It does help to put it aside. It does help to put it away. And so for all the people out there who still have this wound that's open and the story is just still in the middle and they might not get resolution, I do feel for them and how they carry that around. And I'm very happy for you that you've gotten to be able to have so much of your life now be just about present time and enjoying your partner and your cat and your garden and everything else, because you deserve that. You've been through quite a lot. It is really lovely to talk to you, and I'm so happy for you to be able to share your story and to share your happiness now after all that you've been through. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Rachel.
One more thing before you go. This is one of these stories that is not easy to listen to. I have a feeling that Rachel left out a lot of other details just to protect the audience, and also because it's just very hard to think about all that you've gone through in this way. But the important points that she brought up are many. There is something that she said about being in her own petri dish. It's that you just don't know. Is the leader this enlightened being? Is this someone who deserves the adoration that they seem to be getting from the community that they are running? I loved also the phrase that she used, my body was responding, but my mind hadn't warmed up to the idea. There is a disconnect that happens so often in situations where people are violated, where there is this idea that something has happened to you, but you don't know how to process it. You don't know how to think about it. It's also called other things. It's not called abuse a lot of the time, or neglect, mistreatment, abandonment, violation, abuse. And so you don't know those things happen to you. So sometimes when people ask, or an attorney might ask, you might say no, thinking, no, that didn't actually happen. And so for people out there who are going to be interviewing those who have been in these kinds of relationships or these kinds of cults or spiritual organizations, it's not enough to ask, have you been abused? It's important to define what that means. It's important to define what mistreatment means. It's important to define what neglect is. And then to help a person feel that they have the right to be upset about it. That's a whole other part here that often doesn't get addressed when people are being interviewed. They might downplay what happened because they think it's their fault, or they think that they were specially chosen for it. And so they're not quite sure it's a bad thing. And also in some groups, they're told they're supposed to suffer. So are they becoming holier, more sanctified by having been put through something like this? You have to tease apart all of this until you have a person be very clear about what happened to them, how it's seen by the law, and that they didn't deserve it and they didn't ask for it, and that it's something that should have never happened. There was also this term that was used in this particular group that it was this blessed act. And so I find it incredible to hear so often that people are left feeling like they are not supposed to be upset about something because even within a group like this, it might be something you're told to keep secret because it might keep the other people from getting jealous of it. I mean, it's so head spinning. It's so opposite day every day, like I say, within a cult. One of the things that I address a lot with people is this idea that they're often told that they need to forgive the person who has done something to them. And when I've spoken at different conferences and when I have addressed different audiences, sometimes they will say, you didn't bring up forgiveness as a tool for healing. and getting past it. And I have an interesting relationship with forgiveness because I think that it should be merit-based, and I think that it should be based on someone truly apologizing and acknowledging and changing their behavior, and then you can forgive them. Or it should be something that is your idea that you want to do because you know it's going to be helpful to you. But when people are violated in this way, and then it could be by a partner, could be by a priest, could be by anyone, they're often told what they now need to do next, what action step they need to take, which is often to forgive and sometimes to forget and to reframe it like this is something that wasn't so bad that happened to you, but harboring angry feelings about it is sinful. And so you need to actually forgive the person. Well, when people are part of a system where they are perpetrators, but they know built into the system is that the people who they harm are supposed to forgive them, then what's to stop them continuously from doing this and not having anything said to them about what they need to do differently or what they need to stop doing? And so there are times that I have talked to people within religious organizations who are counselors who have said to me, you really need to add forgiveness into the list of healing tools for people. I will say to them, okay, it's definitely on the list. But if you can tell me that you as a counselor or someone within that organization went not only to the person who was harmed to tell them that they needed to forgive the pastor or the guru, but you also went to the pastor or the guru or the boss or whomever, and you told them that they couldn't remain there anymore. Or you told them that they had to take a class in learning how to understand that they need to treat people respectfully, or what violation is, or that they were going to be on probation until they were able to show that they really understood that they had done something wrong, or that they were going to lose their license to be able to do what it was that they were doing, especially if they didn't see what they did was wrong, or if they weren't willing to get counseling for it or take classes for it. And if they weren't willing to come to the person who they had wronged and truly acknowledge it and apologize. And also, if you didn't see changed behavior, that would be the end of the probationary period and they would be out. And I would say to them, have you done that? Have you done even one of those things in connection with the perpetrator? And very often they say no. That's not something that they really need to do. That's not part of their job description. Their job description as a counselor there is, or as another pastor there, or someone that people go to make sure that the engine keeps running as it should, that the people who were harmed have their feelings addressed and then are really pushed, are given a task that they need to then forgive the other person because that's what God would want them to do, or that's what is going to help them keep things good and happy here, or that's what's going to help them heal. But if that advice or any action step is only delivered to the victim and not the perpetrator, then you have a dangerous situation that you're in. Things will never change. And two, the people who do this to other people will be emboldened, knowing that they never have to stop and they never even have to feel bad about it, and there's no consequence. I think if you have been in a situation where you have been told you need to forgive, I'm not saying don't do it if you think it's really going to be helpful to you, but I'm saying you shouldn't feel under obligation. And you also shouldn't be the only one who is talked to about what you then need to do after something has happened to you. It is an empowered stance, I think, to decide who you forgive and what situations and experiences you decide to forget. And it should be based on, again, how much another person is able to take responsibility, or how much you feel it's going to help you move on, because you then, I think, are in the power position as the victim. You then get to decide what your action steps are. So much was taken away from you. So much control was taken away from you by being violated. So take it back by deciding who you forgive and who you don't, and when, and based on what you see and what you need to hear and what you need to know, and based on what's right for you. Take good care. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you very much for listening. Please support Indoctrination on Patreon at patreon.com/indoctrination. Be sure to give us a follow on our social media. Find us on Facebook and Instagram using @Indoctrination Podcast. And for Twitter, find us at @_indoctrination. We love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And for more updates on the show, visit our website at www.podpage.com/indoctrination.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.